I'm hoping everyone is able to see us, and I'm joined today by Terry O'Reilly of Pirate.
Great to be talking to you.
And Age of Persuasion. Terry, thanks so much for joining the Ad Buzz.
My pleasure.
I appreciate your time. So Terry is a co-founder of Pirate. We're in Toronto and New York as well.
Yeah.
And you guys are doing very well.
Yeah.
And it's a great brand and agency, and you guys have done some great work in the past and continue to do so.
Thank you.
So, if anyone isn't familiar with the book, it's Age of Persuasion, and apparently there's a rumor that there could be a sequel to that book. Is that, are you able to talk about that? Or?
You know what, it's in very, very early stages, but I do have a notion for another book. Basically, that book, the gist of it will be, the working title is Don't Outspend Them, Outsmart Them.
Okay.
Because as I do the Age of Persuasion over the years, and because I'm such an ad junkie and ad historian, there's such great stories of how marketers, you know, beat bigger budgets to the punch by just being smart and strategic and
right.
and the use of incredible creative as opposed to incredible media money.
Okay.
And I love those stories, and I think that kind of a topic speaks to small advertisers.
Right.
And also the big ones, because big advertisers don't want to spend a ton of money if they could get there a different way. Right?
Sure.
So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Well, that's great. And how we discussed when I came in about students. Obviously,
yeah.
we're a voice for students and an inside look at the industry.
Yeah.
How can the Age of Persuasion help students?
You know what? I think one of the biggest aspects of the Age of Persuasion is the history in the show, because I think history. First of all, our business has such a great history.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much learning to be had in history. And I think that younger people coming into the business may not have a great sense of the history of the business.
Right.
So I think that's one of the best parts of the Age of Persuasion, is you get kind of steeped in where the great thinking came from, where certain strategy came from. When you see something now that you're working on, and then you hear a great story of how in 1954 that was the first time that had ever been tried, it gives you a real grounding in why that works, and it makes you a better ad person because it gives you some wisdom,
right,
and some context and some insight. Because I think at the end of the day, a great ad person has to bring wisdom to the table.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't just creative chops, or it isn't just a flair for an aspect of this business, because at the end of the day, we're in the persuasion business, and persuasion is an accumulated skill.
Mm-hmm.
And when I've read every book on advertising there ever was.
Mm-hmm.
There ever was. I have one of the greatest ad libraries, I think, at home, because I'm forever collecting books
Sure.
on advertising. The best books of everything I read
Mm-hmm.
are from the 40s and the 50s.
Yeah.
Because the knowledge base then was so deep, and they use results to show you how this worked, when this strategy was first used. Here was the results, and so much of it has not changed.
Mm-hmm.
So much of our business, as Bill Bernbach said, and I'm so fond of quoting him on this, he said, no matter how much things change in life, no matter how fast it gets, he said, I'm only interested in the unchanging man. And I love that as a quote, because what he means by that is, no matter how digital invades our world, it turns everything upside down, but as a species, our
right.
desires, our hopes, our fears, all of those motivational factors never ever change, and a smart ad person recognizes that.
Right, right. And Tuesday, you were at Leading Social Change.
Yes.
Moderator.
Yeah.
But you were also there to learn.
I was.
So maybe you could highlight on the areas that you really, what you took away from there.
Well, you make a very good point to begin with. This is my 30th year in this business.
Mm-hmm.
I started in 1981, and I am still learning.
Okay.
So that's a key thing to students to
That's
know,
good.
that you don't stop learning 10 years
stop,
in.
right?
No,
Yeah.
it is. I learn things every day.
Yeah.
I'll even be in the studio. I mean, imagine I direct 500 commercials a year, and I've been doing that for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was a writer 10 years before that, so you can imagine how many commercials have gone past my face. And I still learn things in the studio.
Yeah.
So smart ad people, students out there, know that if you really want to have a long and great career, is to be open to learning every step of the way. So Leading Social Change day I was at was very interesting to me, because social advertising, not social media,
Mm-hmm.
right? Social advertising is very interesting to me, because it's about changing behavior.
Right.
So some obvious examples of that are, for example, when people started wearing their seatbelts, how advertising and the government and the law changed people's behavior to driving without ever using seatbelts, because when I learned to drive, nobody wore a seatbelt, to everybody wearing a seatbelt, or drinking and driving, or stopping smoking. All that is social marketing. So it's a very difficult part of our business, because you're asking people to change very ingrained, very cemented behavior. And I always find that very interesting, because it's really the biggest task you can ask of advertising and marketing, but it also has maybe the biggest impact on us, as opposed to product and service marketing.
Right.
And I want to do a show on that. We've touched on it in the past in the Age of Persuasion, but I want to do a whole dedicated episode to it. So it was great learning for me to sit there and listen to, for example, there was a great researcher from Brain Juicer there from England, Will Goodhand. Very interesting and funny presenter. And he was showing us research on a really great television spot that I'm sure a lot of your students have seen from England, where a husband's sitting in his living room and he looks like he's driving a car. And then it looks like he's getting into an accident, and his family jumps up in slow motion and kind of...
It's an amazing piece,
locks their hands around him and like a seatbelt. His company did research on that spot, and they gauged second by second what people thought about the spot. And as it turned out, it was missing a factor, which is it needed more of an optimistic feel to it. In other words, people, there has to be some drama, and there has to be some fear and some trepidation and anticipation in the spot, but then it has to resolve in a huge way, not a small way. And his research showed that if it had resolved in an even bigger way, don't know how that would have been achieved. It would have got the persuasion factor would have been increased. And I thought that was a great insight, because most PSAs and most social marketing spots that we get in as a company are all very earnest and all very somber. And there's a feeling in that category that if you're not being somber, you're being irresponsible. But his research was saying, it's like any great movie, he was saying, it has to end on a happy note in order for the persuasion factor to kick in. And that was great learning for me, because I wouldn't have thought that in that category as a rule. So very interesting.
Will's a great guy. I connected with him. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to interview him. We were going to do one, but. So, in the business over 20 years, you've seen interns and students come and go. What's the difference between an intern, or a student for that matter, entering the industry 10 years ago compared to what it is now?
I don't know if it's really that different, Tom. I think that I think there has to be a big digital element to your portfolio now, because that is the new wave. That is changing everything. But I think that's about it. I think that's the only real difference, is another medium has emerged. But the fundamentals are all the same. When a creative director looks at your portfolio, remember that what he or she is looking for are idea people. So they're not looking for writers per se, or art directors per se, although those are the job openings and the definitions of the positions. They're looking for idea people. So your portfolio should be a great example of how you attach selling ideas to products. It's not about the copywriting. They will want to look at that. And like I always say, you have to be born a writer. You can learn to be a better writer, but you can't learn to be a writer. Same with being an art director. But they're looking for ideas, so they should be able to flip through your book pretty fast, because the ideas should hit them like this, as opposed to having to search through or read the copy or spend time trying to figure out what the idea is.
Have it sold to them or explained,
So it's always ideas.
That's good. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because yesterday I was at MDC Partners, 5 for 5, and the theme there was, that ended up being, this digital thinking is not so much a digital agency anymore, it's just an agency, and it should just naturally include that.
I agree.
You shouldn't necessarily seek out just to be digital. It's in everything you do, and that big idea has to go across all mediums, right?
It does. I always say that too. It's like people will ask me to come out and want me to speak to digital, and I always say no, I don't do that, because I only speak to ideas. Because digital really, in many ways, is just another conduit. It's not an idea. You still need to plug an idea into online, or into a website, or into Twitter, or whatever it may be. You still need an idea. So I think you'll see Well, here's an example. I was reading a book from the 50s, my favorite era, as you know, and there was a whole chapter that the writer, this was a creative director writing, saying that he was having a lot of trouble integrating his print copywriters with this new thing called television. So he had a small television creative department, and the two just didn't mix, didn't like each other. And as I read that, I thought, that is so funny, because that's what's happening now. You've got the traditional creative department, then you got the digital guys, and there's two different departments.
Right.
And they kind of talk, but they kind of are wary of each other, when really it should be one department that, digital may be a solution one time, and another time it's not. So the same thing that happened in the 50s when television emerged is happening now with digital.
Right, right. So radio, for anyone that knows me, radio is near and dear to my heart. That's what I love. When I interned, I got to write some radio spots that were produced, so it was a big deal for me.
Right.
But obviously, you are very much into radio.
I love radio.
And one of the questions that came in was, is radio advertising dying?
Everybody asks me that, and here's my answer to that. Radio has survived everything. It was really the first broadcast medium. There was print, and then there was radio in the 20s. And think about that. Radio has survived television, film, digital, outdoor, everything. It has always survived. Going back just before the recession, because recession is always an anomaly, but going back before the recession, radio in this country had 3 consecutive record years of sales.
Wow.
That should tell you something.
Wow.
CBC's audience numbers are the highest for the last 3 years, I think, including the recession year, are the highest audience numbers CBC radio has ever had.
Wow.
And that's astounding, because you can think back on all the great radio there's been on CBC over the years, right?
Yeah.
Peter Zosky and all those great years. Now there are more people listening than ever. So is radio dying? Absolutely not. It's still one of the most affordable mediums to buy. It's still so much more affordable than television, but you can still create personality around your brand with radio, because there's living, breathing voices. Radio still delivers a very targeted audience, which is a great thing about digital too. But if you want to find women 18 to 34, there's 2 or 3 stations in the market that only deliver that. Yeah. So there's not much waste on radio. So I think radio is going to be around for a long, long time, and satellite and internet radio. So it's really is evolving and changing. So I'm a big fan of radio.
So one of the another question that came in was from Richard Bingham at Humber College. He's a professor there.
Yeah.
He asks, where or how do you see the great unwritten contract working in the age of social media advertising?
Well, that was the most contentious chapter in our book, by the way. The premise of that chapter, for anyone who hasn't read it, is that Mike and I really firmly believe, and many great ad people in over the last 50 or 60 years also subscribe to this, that all great advertising should give something back to the audience. So, for example, when you see television commercials while you're watching your favorite program, know that the revenue from those commercials are paying for that station. They're paying for probably a lot of it's going to the production of that program, etc. So it's giving you programming in return for sitting through the ads. Same with radio. You're listening to radio ads on commercial radio. The revenue from those commercials are paying for the music, for paying for the hosts and the disc jockeys, etc. Magazine advertising, newspaper advertising pays for the editorial. Outdoor advertising has a problem, because outdoor doesn't really give you anything back. It just takes. So that industry, I always say, and they must hate me by now, that they have to figure out a way to give back.
Right.
Cinema ads, I think, are the same thing, because I don't think, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think ticket prices came down when ads moved into theaters. That would have been a good
I don't think so.
Contract, right? That would have been honoring the contract. When you get to social media, I think the same thing applies. In order to sit through an ad or anything advertising in nature on social media, I think it has to give you something back. It's as simple as that. So it has to give you content. It has to give you, if it's a store, maybe it gives you some kind of digital coupon to use, something in return for sitting through the commercial message.
Right.
When that works, people are okay with advertising. When it breaks down, they're not. And I think as an industry, we have to always be so careful of that, because it's very easy to run, a roughshod over that agreement, over that contract. But I think it damages the whole industry. Like telemarketing being the perfect example of that. All it does is it wants to take, it's interruptive, it doesn't give you anything back. That gives the whole industry a black eye.
Right. A while back, so we're heavily involved with Twitter.
I love Twitter.
I posted tweeted a question: if agencies ran ad schools,
yeah,
what would that ad school look like?
Here's a good question. I'll tell you one of the things, and I know some schools do this, and it's always a sign of a great school, is it doesn't only teach you the fundamentals of persuasion.
Right.
Remember that it's persuasion, that's the business we're in. We're not in the writing business or the art direction business or the advertising, we're in the persuasion business. So not only does it teach you the fundamentals of persuasion, but it also teaches you how to present your work,
right,
which is also another form of persuasion. I've been in the business over 30 years. I probably, and I've been through hundreds, if not maybe probably thousands of presentations now. I've probably only seen a half dozen great presenters in a boardroom.
Wow.
That's astounding, right? So much great work in this business dies in the boardroom because the creative team doesn't have a great ability to sway a room.
Okay.
And it's one thing to present great work in a wonderful way that gets everybody excited about it. The other side of that same coin is you have to be able to field negative responses to your presentation and be able to swing those responses around.
Right.
And that's really where you earn your money. The selling doesn't start till somebody says no.
Okay.
And I think, and no one taught me how to present. Most people in this business are never taught how to present. And you sort of just learn by osmosis. But I think it should be a course in colleges. And like I say, some colleges do this. How to present your work, because there's only two aspects to our business: creating the work and selling it. And if you only have one side of that coin, you'll only have an average career in this business.
It's interesting that you say that, because I mean, a lot of the ad schools and different colleges they'll teach you to present, but I love how you say that the selling doesn't start until someone says no.
Right.
I don't think that they interact that way. It's more, oh, that was great, because they don't want to make the student feel too bad. They've worked very hard on their campaign over the course of however many weeks, and I think it's interesting that you say that.
I don't think that's helpful when you just get that kind of response to a presentation.
Absolutely not. No.
Because, like I say, it's one thing to be theatrical, because all marketing is theater. So it's one thing to be theatrical in the boardroom, which is very important, because you want people, like if you're presenting radio, for example, which is one of the toughest mediums to present, right? You want people in that boardroom to feel excited by the spot, and that means you have to perform it. So all writers and art directors have to become performers in this business too. When I started out young, in my early days in this business, I really thought the tone to strike in a presentation was that of a businessman. So I was just very reserved to say, here's your ad, here's what it says, I'm going to read it, your character's like this. And I would have middling success with that. And then every once in a while I'd lose myself in the presentation. I'd get dramatic and I'd perform it and I'd sell everything. Every time I did that, I'd sell. My batting average was 100%.
Wow.
So it took me a while to make that correlation that the more theatrical you are, the more they feel it in their gut, because it's all about do they just get it, but do they feel it? But then the second part was, if there's you can get cut right off at the knees by the first response from your client saying, I don't like it because it's negative. And then you have to have such a persuasive, non-defensive response to that. And that only comes with experience, but it can be seeded early in schools. Like I would say to professors, be that contrarian in the room when people are presenting to you, because when they learn how to fend off negative responses, they will hit the ground running in this business like they never knew. It'll be the best thing that ever happened to them.
Do you think it's something that's inherent to our government-funded schools as opposed to a private school like a Miami Ad School or VCU or whatever? Is it something that where the professors are more, well, we need to be a little more careful with our students? Or
I really can't say. I don't know. I just think if you really want to arm students with the real world, I think there has to be some reality in the scenarios you paint. In other words, be tough on the creative, not devastatingly cruel, but I mean be tough on it because clients are tough on it.
Well, it's their money, right?
it's their money, and I'll tell you something. Whenever I've wanted someone to write an ad for Pirate, and when you're on the other side of the table, you realize how scary it is approving something. It is a very scary thing. So I think being tough in the schools is great. People always kind of point their finger at advertising and say that it's one of those industries that there's way too many award shows or way too many pats on the back, and I never really agreed with that, because That's usually an outsider saying that. What you have to realize is this business is a business of rejection.
Right.
You get rejected every day on some level, and when you're putting forth a creative idea, you're putting your heart and soul into it. So with that much rejection, the industry needs to counterbalance that with awarding people who have done great work when they've run the gauntlet of rejection and still got a great idea out there. And that's why award shows, one of the reasons why award shows are so important.
I love that. It's great. Because you do hear a lot of negative press for award shows. It's, you know, I always joke and say, well, you're the one not winning it. That's why you're...
Yeah, it's only people that don't win that complain,
so let's shift to Pirate and let's explain the culture. Can you define the culture of Pirate for a student that wants to come in? I used to say one word, but run with it. I mean, I love this place. I've been here, 40 minutes now, and it's just relaxing. It's a great environment.
It is a great environment in this place, and that I've always been a big believer in that, and so have my partners, that a working environment is so important. Culture-wise, if I had to be, quick with it and short and snappy, I would say we worship ideas. It's a culture of worshiping ideas, because that's the business we're in, and I've always wanted to project that to the industry, that as a creative team, when you've got a great idea, and it comes time to execute it, that Pirate's the place to come, because we are so respectful of ideas.
Right.
As a writer, as an ex-agency guy, I know what it took to get an idea to the production stage. I mean, we're the final stop before broadcast. So you have survived so much to get here. So my job and Pirate's job is to just kick it through the goalposts on the end. So that means respecting ideas, etc. The environment you see here, I've always wanted it to be loose and fun. Everybody works really hard here, but I wanted the look of the place to be comfortable. You spend a lot of hours in that production company, even in our studios, which are kind of decorated like a cottage, not so much the deck of the Starship Enterprise, because I want them to be bright and light and conducive to spending 6 or 7 hours in there, right? So the whole thing, I want people to look forward to coming to Pirate. So it's bright and it's fun, and it's a place where ideas make their last stop before broadcast. So.
Right. So last question point, a portfolio shows up at Pirate, it should have some radio in it.
Yeah, not all radio.
I think that a lot, no, but some. I think the reason I say that is I even get sent books. And I'm in no position to look and critique a book. I can get it into the hands of people that can. But there's never radio, especially the copywriters. There's
that's a mistake.
No radio.
Jeff Roche, who you just did an interview with, he's got a great philosophy that I've always liked. He feels if you can write radio, you can write anything. Like that's his test.
Right.
So, and he's an art director, right? So that's a very interesting point of view.
Well, he was big on the long copy when we got into this interview. So
he has great respect for the written word.
Yeah.
I think Jeff's right on that. I think if you can write great radio, you can write anything else. Whereas I think if you only use print as a test for somebody, you have no idea how they work in broadcast.
Right.
So I think you should have some radio in your book. When I look at a portfolio, I'm looking for ideas first and foremost. Then I'm looking, if it's a writer, I'm looking for some facility with words to see how they persuade with their copy. I'll say something else that I really look for in an interview. At some point in the interview, I will ask them what work of Pirates they love most. And if they can't answer that question pretty quickly, the interview's over, because what that tells me is they haven't done their homework. And I say to everybody out there that's going to interview, if you're going to see a creative director, research that agency, research that creative director's career, be fully prepared to know everything about them when you get in there. And that's a great way to strike a conversation, because when I was first interviewing years ago, I knew this. If I was up for a job of someone with equal talent, I knew I would get the job because I knew everything about that creative director.
Right.
So I'd be sitting as a green young copywriter, sitting in a creative director's office as he flips through my book, and then I would engage him. I would say, you know that ad you did in 1983 that won the Gold Award that year? Can you tell me how you sold that ad to client? Because I can't imagine anything working in the boardroom to sell something that risky.
Yeah.
So teach me, tell me.
Right.
And the creative directors would say things to me like, how do you know about that ad? You know, like it was done in 1971. Yeah. How would you ever know about that? And I said, because I love advertising, because I'm a student of the business.
Right.
And they would go, well, let me tell you. And I would get great learning. They would love that I knew that much about them. Mm-hmm. And like I say, and I got a job very quickly in this business, and I know that was a big part of it, was because I had done my homework.
That's great. Awesome. Well, Terry, thanks so much. Our time is ending, and I really appreciate you taking your time today, and I'm sure everyone that's watching appreciates your time as well. So thanks so much, and we're going to catch a tour, so stay tuned for that as well.